Well, and this is so important for people to understand who are a bit casual about this, right? That you've got yourself, you've got Tucker, you've got Joe Rogan, and there's a whole collection of others, right, that are doing massive numbers, mega numbers, like basically kind of big football game numbers each and every day compared to what's rolling out on television and radio. But the arrogance of the normal machine is that unless it's connected to something that's been around for 30 years, then it doesn't matter. And I think this is a real blind spot because obviously, you know, I'm paying attention to what you and Tucker and lots of other people are saying. I try to find whatever the equivalent is on the left. The best I can come up with is the Young Turks, but they're kind of weird. But the point is...
God Save America, that's another one.
Is that okay? But they're doing okay, but they're not doing your numbers. So it feels to me
Pretty
that there's
strong.
this
Depends on the day.
Yeah, but do you get a sense? So, you know, when you were sitting there on television, you got a sense of who you knew what your competition was. So therefore, when we're talking about an issue of the day, right? Now, obviously, there's people that are telling me that are pro-Trump, basically, look, head down, bum up, see you in 2 weeks, we'll see what happens when it comes to the polls. Then there's the day in, day out, 24-hour news cycle, cable news world that is pretending that every little 5 minutes is different. I suppose that's what I'm trying to talk about here. What's your sense about how the election is being consumed by people?
I mean, I think it's the summer, and in general, people don't pay much attention to the news in the summer, and that's not different now. I mean, it is the election cycle, so we're all getting bigger numbers than we would get in a non-summer year. But I think the average American, the ones who are going to decide this election, they're out living their lives. You know, they're on boats, and they're watching their kids at summer camp, and they're enjoying what time they can in the beautiful sun, which is, you know, a beautiful time of year over here. So they'll start to pay attention more in September, and then things are going to tighten, as they always do. And they tightened already once Kamala Harris became the presumptive nominee, but they're going to get even tighter. And we really have September and October to finalize the messaging around each camp. So, you know, we're going into August. July is basically over. That gives the camps 1 month to try to gear up their messaging and figure out what attacks are going to land and which ones they want to run with in the final whatever days of this election. But early voting is going to start as early as, you know, late September. And so, you know, it matters whether people are paying attention. And in those critical swing states, it matters a lot. I think the problem for the Republicans right now is that she has such a short runway and that she's not going to be so battle tested. And battle testing Kamala Harris would be a good thing for the Republicans. We've seen her enough, those of us who are in political news and follow her closely, to know she usually sounds moronic. She does. If you give her enough time to talk, she will confuse you with her word salad to the point where you're not sure you and she speak the same language, right? Is it me or is it her? She's not particularly clever. She's not particularly likable. She's reversed herself on everything. She is a far left liberal from San Francisco. So if we give her enough time for exposure, the country will see that. The problem for the Republicans right now is they don't have it. They don't have said time. You know, given the early voting that's been unleashed thanks to COVID, the mail-in balloting that's been happening, and the switcheroo on the top of the Democratic ticket, they've got to pull out all the stops to get the messaging on her out there and get it ubiquitous. And the media won't help. Now, they are lucky that we happen to live in a time where they're not just relying on Fox News. They do have fair and balanced media outside of cable to bring people messaging. And if the news is big enough or the exchange is viral enough, it will go everywhere. You know, many in the media, like I said, the Times, they had no choice but to cover the fact that, you know, JD sat with me and said what he said about the cat comments. So the Republicans are better suited right now than they've ever been to combat, you know, one party information dominance. But look, if you look at, say, 2016, did Trump have it any worse back then with the media? No, he didn't. It was, I mean, they hated him just as much, if not more than they do now. And he won. And Republicans have won in the past, too. George W. Bush won. George H.W. Bush won. Donald Trump won, notwithstanding a media that was dominant and controlled by the left. So now they're in a better position than ever. And they've got a nominee who, at least as of a couple of weeks ago, was looking at a landslide. He's still got the advantage. And so Republicans feeling like, oh, it's hopeless, you know, because the media is going to control the message between now and November, need to buck up. because they still are better suited right now to win this election than they've been in a long time.
Well, and once you start delving into some of the details of these polls, like firstly that media consumption thing I spoke about, in the Fox News poll, what's the most important issue, according to people, even after the change in candidate? Immigration. Then daylight second, then it was inflation first, then daylight, then immigration, then we start getting down to single digits. So the issues are still on Trump's side, the betting market's still on Trump's side, the capacity to fight back well and truly there. But I've got to say, again, watching your show as I always do, listening to it on Sirius XM, and I know this is sort of part of the sickliness of the Kamala campaign, but the cringe factor of not just the media suck up, but what they're putting out there, like, great good luck, drag queens for Kamala, but white dudes for Kamala, Karens for Kamala. Like, these were all people who were going to vote for Joe Biden anyway, but they're being presented as if they have returned to the fold.
Those calls, white dudes for Kamala and the women, the Karens for Kamala, I mean, it is absolutely stomach turning to listen to what the Democratic Party has become. I grew up in a Democratic household. My parents were Democrats. My dad was a professor and my mom was a nurse. And they always felt like Republicans were for rich people, and we weren't rich. And so we were Democrats. We weren't particularly ideological, but we were Catholic. So we weren't, liberal on every issue. In any event, that was how a lot of families were. They were sort of moderate Democrats who weren't particularly far left wing. They just sort of voted Democrat because they thought it would be better for them economically. What that party has become is unrecognizable. Did you see the woman on the women who's saying, like, God forbid you correct a BIPOC, meaning person who's black or indigenous or a person of color. If you're white and a black person or a Native American heritage person says something that's wrong, you're not allowed to correct them, or you're racist. Sorry, but I don't agree. And I will be correcting BIPOC people or white people, whether they're the future president of the United States or my neighbor. And it's disrespectful to treat them like they're so eggshell skinned that you can't point out when they say something that's stupid or wrong. This is how the left looks at people of color. It's racist. And they don't even see it. They think they're the elevated ones trying to lecture the rest of us into being, inclusive and kind. And none of that is true. So that's what the Democrats have become. And as I point out, the party that is parading, naked trans people on the White House lawn. Some guy in our nuclear department who was stealing women's luggage so he could wear our dresses. Yeah. Some guy who's parading himself out there as like the first female to be a part of the HHS cabinet. No, he's a man who lived 55 years as a man and then declared himself a trans person and now wants to trans your kids. There's nothing normal or non-weird, to steal their term, about any of this. And what's happened now, like with the pylon and JD Vance, it's actually kind of interesting, Paul, back to that, is they almost seem like they can't, or for right now don't, want to go after Trump in the ways that they used to, because the man is 14 days after taking a bullet to his head while he's out there campaigning. And so they almost, you can sense, feel a little bit chagrined about unleashing their cannons on him in the way they have in the past. Hitler, racist, misogynist, all the things. They're kind of holding their fire a bit because he took actual fire. He's still got a scar on his ear. And so they seem to be turning it all on JD Vance as like the stand-in for Donald Trump. I just don't think that's going to work. I don't think people don't vote for a ticket because of the vice presidential nominee. Trump remains the 800-pound gorilla in the race. And Trump, I think, will define this race one way or the other, right? Still, whether it's Kamala across from him or Joe Biden across from him. And all they've done by subbing in candidates is even out things. They were hemorrhaging because of Joe Biden for good reason. And now we've gotten back to stasis, where really Trump will wind up defining this race one way or the other. And the Democrats, their hatred for him will also define the race, right? There are more and more who are open-minded to Donald Trump because of the economy, because of immigration. And we've got, 90 plus days to figure out just how strong the feelings are on him.